Hello, podcast listeners. We know podcasts are a great way to catch up on a program that you may have missed on KSJE, and it's provided as a free service of this radio station. But KSJE is now listener-supported, and so while you enjoy this podcast, we hope that you'll also take some time to join KSJE. Become a member today. It's quite easy to do. Just go to our website at ksje.com/support and pick the level of support that best matches your budget. Thanks again for listening. Here's your podcast.
Welcome back to Right on Four Corners. I'm your host, DelSheree Gladden. I'm a writer, journalist, and editor, and a USA Today bestselling author of somewhere around 30 some odd books. And on this week's episode, I have Alexandra Diaz with me, and she's going to be talking about her not yet released book, Farewell Cuba, Mi Isla, and just everything that went into that. It's a really beautiful, fascinating story, and I'm excited to talk about it. But first, Alexandra, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, thank you so much for having me on the show. As it was said, my name is Alexandra Diaz. I am a bilingual children's book author in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I write mostly books for middle school age and teenagers and have been writing books for, several years. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and your books have won several awards. I was looking through your website and your bio. Yeah, you've got a pretty good range of books. I was impressed. You've got a few different ages and genres, and pretty consistently your writing has been well received and won awards. And tell me a little bit more about that side of it, because that's always fun to talk about.
Yeah. Well, and it is always very exciting. So the book that has done the best is called The Only Road, or El Único Destino, if you're reading it in Spanish. And that one won the Pura del Pre Award, which, if for people who are not in the children's literature book world, you may not know what that is. But it's ultimately like winning the Latino Grammys. So the Pura del Pre is presented by the American Library Association. They want to hand out the Caldecots, the Newberries, but the Pura del Pre is specifically for Latino authors who are writing about Latino themes, Latino books. So yes, that was a huge award that one won. I was absolutely ecstatic when it happened, and it also won the Americas Award, which is presented by a different organization, but again, it's similar in the sense that it is awarded to books that are promoting Latino culture and heritage. And then my other books have gotten other awards, the International Latino Book Award. It has been listed in the Bank Street Books of the Year. One of my books was also named as the New Mexico book for the event that they do at the Library of Congress. So that book was called The Crossroads, and it was New Mexico's selection a couple years ago to represent New Mexico heritage and culture and authors. I'm very fortunate that my books have gotten some good recognition, and as a result, a lot of people are reading them.
That's wonderful. And I wanted to ask you, before we jump into the new book, you have 4 of your books that are published in both English and Spanish. Tell me about that process, because that's not everyone's experience to be able to do that. Tell me about how you approach that and working with a publisher to have the 2 editions published simultaneously or pretty close together.
Yeah. So that started with my publisher, Simon & Schuster, and the book, The Only Road, which I previously mentioned. And it happened while I was still writing The Only Road. My editor at that time said, hey, we would really like to publish this in Spanish as well. Would you like to translate it? And I was met with a yes, no, yes, I don't know, kind of a panic moment, because Spanish is my native language. However, I've always gone to English-speaking schools, so most of my education has been in English, and it is the language that I am more familiar writing in, reading in, communicating in. I was excited to do it, but I was a bit apprehensive. And when I mentioned this to my mom is great, and she, immediately said, "Claro que sí, niña, of course, we're going to translate it together." So that has actually been how it has come about. So after that book, then it's just almost been taken for granted that my books with Simon & Schuster will continue to be published in English and Spanish. So even this forthcoming book, it comes out in September in English, and it comes out in December in Spanish. I'm actually doing the last-minute translations and edits with it right now with that future book. And working with my mom is always an interesting experience. I'm sure everyone has a different relationship with their mother. And my mom, she's very good at the grammar. She's very good at the spelling, but she's not a writer, unfortunately. So I remember when I had given her The Only Road, I had written something in English that was something along the lines of, "He walked away with a swagger to his step as he put the phone to his ear." And my mom translated it as "se fue," which means he left. And I'm like, "Mommy, you can't do that, because a translation is not just knowing what happens. It's how it happens and being able to see the character as they're doing these actions." And she's like, "Oh, it sounds as if your book has a heart and soul." And I'm like, "See, Mommy, it does. And you've just taken my heart out and, taken it out of the book." So after that, she learned that she did need to translate more of the feeling. So yes, obviously there are words that don't translate literally from English to Spanish, and you wouldn't want that kind of robotic static thing. But yeah, so she learned that she does need to translate more of the feeling. So that's actually where I come in more. My mom does the grammatical side, and I do the more feeling, creative writing side, if you will.
That's so interesting. Yeah, I've been thinking about it, and it's a difficult process for a professional translator to read someone else's work and try to get the right tone, the right feeling to what they're saying, using sometimes imprecise words, because languages don't necessarily have those one-on-one translations where you can just word for word restructure everything. And so that's interesting that was still challenging for you, with it being your words and being fluent speaker of both languages, to go through that process and learn. I'm assuming it's gotten a little bit easier from book one to this current book of working through that process?
Yes, it has gotten easier. We've definitely developed more of a flow in terms of what we do. But there's still always challenges. My mom's not good with computers, for example. So sometimes she forgets how to do something on the computer, and it'll be something as simple as like an accent mark. So then I have to go back and look at it with more of that copy edit side, which is not my forte. Like I said, my mom is the one who's better at that. But because she's just not always on it with the technology, she occasionally forgets an accent mark here and there. So then I have to go back like, okay, is this word supposed to have an accent mark? Yeah, there are challenges that still exist like that. But for the most part, we have gotten into a good rhythm. And I have to say, I do enjoy translating it, and I really love having the opportunity to do so, because I have read things that have been translated into Spanish, and I always find them to be very stiff and very academic. And I think that's because a professional translator has actually had professional training. So their Spanish is more academic, is more formal, is more correct in some ways. But a lot of times, as humans, we don't talk in a way that is perfectly correct. So we may use slang, we may use word choices that someone who has actually been trained in translation might not think of using.
Well, and regional differences as well. If a professional translator isn't native to whatever dialect is being used, I'm sure that adds another layer of difficulty to it.
Definitely, yes. And that's one of the things that makes this book so fun to translate, because my parents are both Cuban. So the fact that I'm using a lot of Cuban Spanish in this is good, versus in other books, I've had to adapt my Spanish for more of a Guatemalan or a Mexican readership, because that is where the characters are coming from. So I want to keep that voice genuine. Mm-hmm. So yes, even native Spanish speakers are going to find a lot of words in this book that they're like, what does that mean?
Yeah,
like, it's Cuban, just roll with it.
Well, and even, I was reading the English version, and there's a fair amount of Spanish sprinkled throughout it. And yes. I'm really bad with languages. I'm terrible at memorizing things. So my Spanish is fairly limited, even, having spent most of my life in New Mexico. But even so, there were some words that I'm like, that's different than the Spanish I've seen. And so that was kind of fun to see how true it was to the culture that you're representing in this. And I always appreciate that level of realism in something that I'm reading, that it really spoke to your background and how much you brought of yourself and your family into the story.
Yeah, thank you. And for those of you who are not Spanish speakers or not Cuban Spanish speakers, there is always a glossary in the back of my books. So I know that can kind of take you out of the story, but if you are wondering what the word pim pam poo means, for example, you can go to the back. There is a glossary, and it will let you know, a pim pam poo is a Cuban word for a rollout bed or a cot.
That's wonderful to have that.
There you go.
Well, and before I jump into the story a bit more, give listeners a brief kind of idea of what the book is about.
Yeah, so it is a historical fiction novel. It takes place in 1960 and 1961, and very, very loosely based on my mother and her family's experience in leaving Cuba at that time. So there are a lot of historical details that I have included. There was a lot of research I had to do, but I also had to fictionalize the characters, the story, to suit, first of all, an actual book, because when you write fiction, you want ultimately a beginning, middle, and end. You want a story arc. You want character development. And then also to suit the time and suit things that were happening at that time that maybe my mother's family may not have experienced directly themselves, but I feel are important to mention. One of the biggest differences is that when my mother came to the United States, she was 17 years old. I needed to change the age of my protagonist because I needed it to be suitable for a middle grade reader, someone who's 11 to 14, for example. And then, of course, because my protagonist is now 12 instead of 17, again, I had to do all the things that a 12-year-old might be going through. For instance, school and being the new kid in school, being in a school where integration was just beginning to happen, and the cultural complications of being a child of the 1960s, the social complications. So one of the big things that my mother would always say when she was younger was that her mother was very adamant that my mother would get married and have children. Like, that was my mother's role. She went to university to find a husband. And I include details like that as well, but I also include details of my own personal opinion that, yes, it's fine for women to get married and have families, but that's not the only thing they're capable of doing. They are capable of so much more, versus in the 1960s, that was pretty much the expectation for young women at that time. So that's definitely something that I brought into it and created situations around that, even though it wasn't exactly how it had been for my mother. But the idea was still there. The heart is still there. And I think that is very true with the book, is that it's fictionalized, but at its core, at its essence, the longing for home, that is still very much there. So events may have shifted, but at its core, it is still something that people were experiencing at that time.
Well, and I was struck as well by how relevant it is to a lot of what's happening today. And
Yeah.
it really kind of shows certain things that haven't changed over half a century. And,
Yeah,
we have so many
it's scary.
refugees, in going to here all over the world, fleeing these areas that are very dangerous situations for one reason or another. And today we are still battling some of those stereotypes that the characters Victoria and Jackie face of people assuming, what their lives were like, what their families are like, that, oh, they can't be trusted. Discrimination based on what they look like. And it was really striking to me.
Yeah, I was realizing that as well. And I started writing it over 3 years ago. And I have a character who is Russian. And in the 1960s, there was the constant threat of Russia attacking the atomic bomb. There were people who had dug out shelters in the back. And, now we're still concerned about, what Russia might do. Maybe not to the same extreme as they were in the 1960s, but still very topical. And then as a result, people from Russia are being discriminated against because of something that their country is doing. So I thought, as I continued to write, I was like, wow, this is actually more topical than I had initially thought it was going to be.
Yeah, it's kind of eerie how much of what you're writing about was happening in 1960 we're repeating today.
Yeah.
It really kind of gave me just a oh my gosh kind of feeling like this is just, it's crazy to think that some of those situations that maybe, even just 5 years ago would have seemed more foreign to us who didn't experience it firsthand. And now I'm seeing my kids at school, going through active shooter drills. And that was something that the scene in yours where they have the air raid drill and the poor little boy in the classroom just panics and runs for the window and just about knocks himself out trying to escape because he thinks it's real. And
right.
Just how, I don't know, how bizarre it is that our kids are facing something so similar. I remember growing up and hearing about, get under your table for, when the air raid siren goes off and you're just oh my gosh, what a bizarre thing to experience. And now that really is part of our kids' everyday lives to have these drills on how to react to a violent situation at school.
Right. I mean, especially with all those school shootings and things like that, a lot of schools will have drills on how to handle that kind of an emergency, which, is very different from when I was in school, because we would have fire drills, but we wouldn't have anything that was terrorist related or human involved, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And that does make it scary. And then there's still, even as far as we have come, there's still so much racial discrimination and attitudes of what somebody can do, what they can't do, just based on the color of their skin, on their heritage. There are assumptions of people of color that are just completely false. So it is kind of disturbing that, yes, this was 1960 and now we're in 2023 and we still, as a culture and a society, have not advanced very much in our prejudice, in our lack of social acceptance.
Well, and one of the scenes in the book that I felt really highlighted that well was this moment of innocence for Victoria when she's reading her friend's story, and she understands that it's an allegory of someone not being accepted, but she doesn't understand why he wouldn't be accepted. And he gently explains to her, as best he can, also being a young boy trying to figure out how to get through the world as someone who doesn't look like everyone else around him, doesn't have the same background. And the innocence that she listens to him and she's open to learning about his experience. And it's just something that she was like, why would this matter? Why wouldn't people like you? You seem perfectly nice. And just that beautiful openness of her character to be moving through this new experience of being in a new country and just opening her heart to people as much as she can and not understanding why other people can't do that as well.
Right, right.
You mentioned
Yeah,
the character, the Russian character Katya, and that was another one. It just breaks your heart, like how the other girls treat her in the home economics class. And I thought that was another really wonderful example, because she does look similar to the other
right.
students in the class. She comes from a European heritage, but because of the social issues going on at the time, she's treated even worse than some of the Haitian or Cuban refugees who maybe don't look the same. And so I wanted to ask you a little bit about just those contrasts and how you worked with a topic that is hard to talk about and can be really sensitive.
Yeah, yeah. I would say that I actually came about it in a way that I was putting myself into Victoria's shoes a lot. And I'm not a social person myself. I do find it challenging to meet people and get along, not necessarily get along with them, but just connect with people. So I am definitely the kind of person that if I go to a party, I am by the drinks table watching everyone because I don't have it in me to just walk up to a random crowd and be like, "Hi, how's it going? Tell me what you do." That's just not in my personality. So I definitely could sympathize with Victoria, and the initial idea was I wanted to show how culturally different the Cuban heritage was from the, let's call it the gringo, the United States mentality is. And even though, yes, there are a lot of Cubans that are racist and there was definitely racial discrimination, it was never, and I say this because this is what my mother has said, so I've never actually lived in Cuba, but there wasn't the same level of discrimination in Cuba that there was in the United States. So, for example, there weren't separate bathrooms, there weren't separate water fountains. And for Cubans, it was more important what social class you came from rather than what you looked like. If you went to private school, that was considered better regardless of what you looked like. And that's just kind of showing an example. Just going back to me putting myself into those shoes, I thought, okay, Victoria is going to make friends with the people who are likewise outsiders, the quiet people in the class, the ones that are not loud and kind of in your face. And because she would have grown up with a lot of people of color, but also, you know, a lot of people of color of various social status, she wouldn't see color in the same way as someone who had been living in the South at that time and had been raised to think that there should be racial segregation. It was very natural, I would say, for me to have these two friends that are different because they are the ones that I also would have gravitated towards because, again, I'm not comfortable going up to a new crowd of people and suddenly making friends. And so Victoria definitely got that from me.
I love how there's always little bits of ourselves that we put into our writing and work through some of our own thoughts and issues and things through our characters.
Yeah.
I think that's a very therapeutic part of creative writing.
Yeah, and I would say ultimately our characters become a better person of ourselves. So I probably would not have been able to make friends with anyone. I probably would have been, you know, just kind of hiding out and trying to interject and not be able to do it. So, yes, the fact that Victoria was able to make friends a lot easier than I feel I would be able to, I was very proud and pleased that she was able to do that and that she had, you know, her own internal strength. So she's not entirely me. She's definitely her own character. She has her own thoughts, her own feelings. But yes, there are definitely things from me, from my mother, that have gone into that character.
I like that. I did feel like this overall, just even though there's some very heart-wrenching scenes, especially when they're first leaving Cuba and they have to leave so much behind and give up so much, and watching the two characters, these young girls, as they're separated after having spent their whole lives together, there are some very just touching, sad moments. The overall feel of the book is very hopeful. The characters really grow and they learn to adapt in ways that they didn't think they could. And I just wanted to ask you, what do you hope that readers take away from this story?
Yes, I think that there's two answers to that. So first of all, I do like to have hopeful books. So even the other books that I have written have all dealt with modern-day immigration and some pretty horrific situations. I do want to leave the reader with hope. And I'm sure part of that has to do with me liking things that are hopeful and wanting not a happy ending, but okay, maybe we can work things out type of ending. So that is definitely something that I gravitate towards myself as a writer. And then as you were saying, what do I hope readers get out of this? I would like them to get a better understanding of a situation that even though it was historical, it's still topical and it's still similar to something that a lot of people, as you said, are experiencing in today's world. So opening awareness and understanding that not everyone's lives have been a certain way, that there is a lot of diversity. And there's also not just diversity within, different cultures, but even within the same Cuban culture, there can be diversity. It's not a matter of like all Cubans are the same. Not all Spanish speakers are the same. Not all immigrants are the same.
Absolutely. I think that's such an important lesson to just open yourself up to learning more and understanding where people are coming from and giving that chance to get to know what's behind who someone is and how they've lived and what has brought them to that point in their life. Something I love about doing the show is getting to learn more about people from all over that are telling these wonderful stories to readers out there and sharing that with them.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that I love reading about, people who are different from me as well and who have experienced different things than I have.
There's so much to learn that, we won't have the chance in our regular lives to see and do everything that we can experience through reading and through fiction. And I think that's an awesome thing about art. It is definitely one of the things I love about it. Well, we are out of time. I could probably sit here and talk to you about this for quite a bit longer. But I do want to give you a chance to tell people how they can find you, because the new book, Farewell, Cuba, Me, Isla, is not going to be out until September, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so where can people find you and your books and kind of keep an eye out for that release later this year?
I have a website, alexandra-diaz.com. I am found on Twitter, Alexandra T. Diaz, on Instagram, Alexandra Diaz Author. I'm very good at responding to emails, so if you're to go to my website and my email is printed on my website, again, that was alexandra-diaz.com. I'm very good at responding to any emails anyone, any age wants to send me. And in terms of my books, they can be ordered by any independent bookstore, any chain bookstore, any online bookstore. A lot of New Mexico libraries also have copies of my books. And one of the great things you can do with libraries is you can suggest to your library, hey, could you please order this book? So if you're not able to get the book yourself, take advantage of your library and get them to buy the book for you. Yeah, my books, like I said, are available for order, and this new one is available for pre-order.
Right. Well, I really enjoyed reading it. I just loved the characters and the story, so I definitely recommend people check it out. But I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the show. I really enjoyed our chat and reading the book, and I'm excited to see it come out.
Yes, and thank you so much for reaching out and having me on the show. It's great to talk to you about books.
Well, thank you again so much. I really enjoyed this.
Great, thank you.
Did you enjoy that podcast? We hope that you did. And if you did, share it with your friends. And if you really want to keep podcasts like this coming, please support KSJE. You can do it easily online at ksje.com.